Welcome to episode 22 of the XrmToolCast. This episode will be a special dual drop episode with CRM Rocks. CRM Rocks is a podcast hosted by Markus Erlandsson and is found at XrmRocks.com. In this episode, Markus hosts an argument between Jonas and I, which is better, early bound coding and the early bound generator, or late bound coding and his late bound constants generator. This will be a dev-heavy episode, as there are a lot of dev-heavy arguments to be made over this topic. So, if you're interested in that, great. Or if you just want to hear two dev people talk and argue over each other, this is definitely the episode for you. So, let's get started.
Hi and welcome everyone. This is Markus Erlandsson and today's podcast will be about early bound generate versus late bound constants generate. And with me today I have Jonas Rapp from XrmKonsulterna and Daryl Labar from Gap Integrity. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
How are you doing, Jonas?
It's great, thank you. In isolation up in Stockholm in Sweden, it's up compared to you at least.
Yeah, how are you, Daryl?
I'm doing good. We had a little nice bout of weather and then it got colder again, so I'm kind of hoping that it warms back up again so I can spend a little more time in my yard rather than in my house. But yep.
So, Daryl, what's the best with Jonas?
So if I was going to say some things about Jonas, he's from Sweden, so that's got to help at least somewhat, right?
Yeah.
He also he works with Sarah Lagerquist, so it can't be too bad.
Did you say I work for Sarah Lagerquist?
He works with.
Okay.
With.
Good.
Yes. No. Yeah. I'm well aware there's a hierarchy here somewhat, but no. But no. An actual serious no. I'm not sure how much Jonas actually sleeps. Last time I was asking him questions at like 11:30 his time, he was answering them. He was always constantly seems to be working on something new, and he has the most plugins or tools for the XrmToolBox of any other developer that I think that's true. At least you have the top, I think you have 4 of the top 6 or something like that most used tools in the toolbox. So you definitely seem to find the right niche of things that need to be filled and make yourself useful. So I have hours and hours of my life that I owe to my friend.
That's very impressive, Jonas. And then for you, Jonas, what's the best with Daryl?
Well, I'm going to go a bit fringe here, but his Twitter. You need to follow Daryl on Twitter if you don't do it already. Because, I mean, he tweets now and then and always has this, well, I took over someone else's project, and then he shares some crappy code, and it actually makes me feel good that my projects aren't actually that bad. So I think, and always someone else wrote the code, of course, according to Daryl on Twitter. I'm not so sure about the reality.
Yeah.
I think it's just his own project.
It may or may not have been me 3 years ago, yes, but yeah.
No, may or may not. Well, someone else is. I'm not the same guy as I was 3 years ago anyway. So I would encourage you to follow Daryl on Twitter. It's hilarious and kind of saddening sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of a tick off of the daily WTF, only I call it hashtag daily or what the heck, WTH, what the heck? So I'd be a little more politically correct.
And it makes me love my own customers and projects.
Yeah, sometimes you just find things in the code and you're like, oh no, what's...
WTH.
Yeah.
Just reminding you, your life could suck as bad as mine. That's all I do.
Go independent. Find the crappy projects.
All right. So Daryl, what's the best thing for you with the early bound generator?
So I guess we'll focus on. I'll cover both the tool itself as well as just the idea of using early bound generation versus late bound.
Yeah, we can probably try to go with what are these things to begin with.
Yeah. So first, the early bound generator is a tool for the XrmToolBox that is based off of the CRM service util that comes in the SDK, and it's just a GUI wrapper to be able to generate settings in a config file, as well as there are some custom plugins that I wrote for the CRM service util to do some things that it doesn't do out of the box. So that's the early bound generator, but the whole idea of it is to do early bound generation, which is going through, and since every single CRM or CDS instance is completely different than the other, it looks at the metadata and then it creates the actual code for that specific instance of CDS. And then when you're coding, you don't have to guess what properties or what attributes an entity has or what the types of those attributes are. The tool generates those explicitly for you, and you'll never have to worry about typing a name wrong or casting an attribute to the wrong type because it's hard-coded for you, and you get all your lovely IntelliSense and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, so that's the early bound generator versus early bound generation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Jonas, then, what is the late bound constants generate?
Well, since I came from a development world without early bound generation, so when I started working with Dynamics 3.5 eons ago, I just started coding, and it asked for the attribute name, and I typed in the attribute name and so on, and I basically didn't know anything else. So that's where I came from, and then one day you realize someone is making typos, and it doesn't look good. It's so vulnerable to just having to reference entities and attributes and relationship names and everything by literal strings that you're writing in your code. So I figured, why not sort of do a little bit of what these early bound things do, and look at the metadata, let you select whatever entities, attributes, relationships you're working with, and generate constants for them, because we've been generating those constants manually for quite some time and realized, okay, this is just as usual. I'm too lazy for this. And the laziness is the mother of all tools. So I created a tool to generate all those constant classes for us, so we can basically continue working with our late bound code in C# and feel a bit more safe. So it's not even halfway there. It's just looking over the fence to the early bound side, but to get a bit more security about names of attributes and entities.
So they both have that thing in common, that they generate so you know what fields you have on each entity, so you don't have to look up, okay, was it something ID, or was it just the name of that, or was it
exactly. And my tool, or the late bound constant generator in XrmToolBox, it can also include what do you call it, metadata tags, sort of comments on these constants, so you can actually see when you're using them, is this a string, is it an integer field, or what type of field is it required? So you can see that. And I actually saw one of these tweets from Daryl the other day, showed us some code where someone within air quotes, of course, was reading data from CRM and then looked up the metadata for that same entity to interpret, like to know which type of attributes are these. So there are a lot of ways to make your life miserable, but this just makes it a little less miserable.
All right, so what would you say is the best thing with late bound constant?
Well, the tool, of course, is good, because if you're going the late bound path, you you get the security of knowing this is generated from the metadata. You get all the attribute names and so on for right. And and I think using late bound as a development concept is good from my perspective, or at least was from the beginning as well. That's how it started. You get a quick start. You can start coding right away. You don't have to generate it from the source environment and regenerate as soon as you want to expand your code and get more entities in there, or as you customize the system. And I think many times the customization and the development go sort of in parallel, hand in hand. So that would make you need to regenerate every time. I don't know what it's like today, but I know at least it used to be that way. If you used early bound classes that were generated in an environment that didn't look exactly like the one you are targeting now with your code, everything would explode.
We will come to that. We will come to that. But hold your horses, Jonas.
No. So yeah. So okay. Some obvious things: smaller footprint, a smaller DLL basically for your plugins or whatever you're building. But yeah, it's just this. I think it's mostly. It's easier to get started. It's easier to just start working. And I've also seen there was this discussion the other day about frameworks for your C# development. Should you create your own? Should you just use plain SDK from Microsoft, or what should you use? And I mean, the conclusion there is you like what you do, and you tend to do what you like. So I I have done late bound from the beginning, so that's what I like since I know it. And I may be wrong, but this is what I know, so this is what I like.
All right, Daryl.
All right. So do you want me to respond to him, or do you want me just to give the reasons of what I my top three here?
Let's go with Jonas. What he
So the one thing that Jonas pointed out here that I think is a fear that a lot of people have is, what if my early bound entity generation doesn't match my environment? Because I think Jonas, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, hey, if it's not exactly like my environment, it's going to break,
No,
right?
I said explode.
Gonna explode. Okay, yeah, sorry. So that must be the so it's going to explode. But there's unless you're actually doing some sort of metadata reflection to like generate columns on the fly of the early bound entities, you're not ever going to have an issue that happens in early bound that doesn't also happen in late bound. So the things to think of: if you remove a column, remove an attribute, and that's different now, as long as you don't attempt to retrieve that attribute or attempt to update that attribute, or then you're not going to have any problems both in early bound or late bound. But if you attempt to retrieve it or you attempt to update it in either of those worlds, you will explode, or the code will explode. So it just because the early bound has properties that don't maybe exist or aren't correct, as long as you don't use them, it will work just fine, the same way as it'll work just fine in late bound. So
Okay.
I don't
So
ever
has
see there
this
being a
changed?
reason that it is safer to be in late bound rather than early bound.
Okay, so is this something that's changed over the time, or was I misinformed from the beginning?
This would be something that you were misinformed from the beginning. The one thing that I ever did that I ever had a problem with is I said, I'm going to be smart and I'm going to generate a column set based on the columns that are custom columns. So give me all the custom columns, which, if you probably have 8 or 10 entities that have, 8 or they have a small number of columns. That's just the custom columns, and you want those all the time. Then great. I created a little tool to go through, reflect over the entity to do that. But that broke because then it would be adding in columns all the time, even if it wasn't really being used. And so if you happen to generate that one, then that would create a column set that wasn't valid if it didn't exist in the environment. So that was like the one time where I've ever had an issue. Hey, it has to match exactly, but that was because I was doing something frankly kind of stupid. But that was, so that's the only case. And that would be the same issue if you were doing something like that for your constants, reflecting over your constant class and generating a column set based on the constants. You'd have the same issue.
Yeah, if you
absolutely.
ask for something in CRM that doesn't exist, or sorry, Power Platform that doesn't exist, it will break.
No, it will explode, right, Jonas?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
That's why I always wear a helmet during development.
All right. So that was one big myth, I think, that has turned a lot of people off from early bound since the beginning of time is, hey, I don't have to generate my entities more often in late bound than I do in early bound. No, unless you're mainly going in and adding like 1 or 2 column names manually to your late bound generation, then okay, yes, in that case you could still do the same thing and mainly add it to the early bound. It's just a little more difficult, that's all. So that would be the only case that I could see that you could talk about it being quote unquote, you have to generate them less often. So but anyway, okay, so those are some myths there. But my number one reason for using early bound is I like to put it this way: friggin' type safety. Okay, so you know what your attributes are, you get them out automatically, you don't have to cast them. So much of the code, every single time you want an attribute, you have to cast the attribute to the specific type. You have to do the helper method to go get the attribute value that checks to see if it's null or not and attempts to cast it, or if it exists in the collection or not, and all that kind of fun stuff. That just all goes away, and it's just so much cleaner with that type safety in there. So that's my number one thing of, hey, why early bound? Number two is something that I like to use a lot. It's called interface extensions. I call it interface extensions. And this is something that a lot of people would say, oh, you have to use late bound in this situation. And I will say there are situations where you should be using late bound, but some situations, let's say like if you wanted to get the address of an entity in a displayable format, all of the out-of-the-box entities that you'd be getting the address of have the same exact address fields, or very closely the same exact address fields. So you would say, oh, well, if I want to do this on multiple entities, then I shouldn't be typing it to that. I want to go ahead and do it as a late bound approach, where instead you could go through and just define an interface that is those specific fields that you need to create your actual class, your actual format for your address, and then you could just add that interface to those types, and now you actually still have your early binding. It's just cast to an interface, and you can even put methods on the interface as well. Like you can make it like an extension method that says get address or get formatted address, and so you can apply that to all those different entities, implement that interface based on the attribute that they have.
Yeah.
So that's my number 2 thing that wouldn't be possible with late bound. And number 3 is the ability to be able to.
Wouldn't be possible.
Okay, Jonas. So
anything is possible.
Explain it to us.
My hands are free. They are not tied by early bound. They're hard types and stuff. I can do whatever I want with my late bound code.
As long as it makes sure that it's exactly what the metadata is defined as.
Yeah.
Just what an interface does.
So you don't have to care about what the metadata is like. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we both have to care, but I don't have to care because it's already typed for me. Where you have to make sure you type it, not
So
like
Jonas, you're telling us that this extension interface or the interface here, it would be possible the same way with the late bound constants generator, right?
Since I didn't really understand everything Daryl said about the interface and the extension and everything, and adding that to the class, I'm wondering how he adds an interface to a pre-generated early bound class. Though I fail to understand
I think that it's possible to use a partial class and then extend that with the interface. You have it in a separate file, so you don't actually add code to the generated file.
That is the correct answer.
Okay, so the partial. All right. Why didn't you say partial? Okay. And of course, my answer is yes, you can do that late bound.
Well, yes, you could do it late bound, but not with an interface. Not with
no,
a C-sharp
because there is no class to sort of put the interface on.
Correct.
Yeah, unless you just extend the entity class.
But then you'd be extending entities that aren't possible for that interface as well. And even that wouldn't work either, because you'd need properties on the entity class to implement the interface from. I'm not buying it, Jonas. I'm not buying it.
The consultant in me says I can do anything.
We want this red line to be blue. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
We want them all to be perpendicular to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that got pretty techy.
Yeah. So what's the best things with the late bound? So you said one, right? And can you please continue?
Are you asking me again? I said one.
Yes,
I said
Jonas.
that I will get a quick start and I don't have to regenerate as I expand my code or expand my customizations. But all my arguments have already been shut down by Daryl. So I think I'm going to bed now.
Okay, so what about the file size then,
Yeah,
Jonas?
exactly. Yeah, I had that as well, the smaller footprint. And I know, usually that's a non-issue, but I mean, unless you have huge plug-in assemblies or something that grow beyond whatever, but usually it's not a big problem. It used to be bigger of a problem, I guess, in earlier versions when it wasn't possible to sort of segment the early bound generated files as much. But I mean, everything that has size affects performance in one way or another. I think that could be an argument as well. But also, I know maybe this episode will not go entirely the way you wanted it, so that me and Daryl just scream at each other, because I know it's a bit cleaner, it's nicer to do it early bound, but I just being a bit rogue and continuing. But it's easier for me. I get things done faster. I definitely do that, but it's all a matter of what you're used to and your habits.
Well, I can buy the plugin if you're really lazy and you didn't even know about the early bound generator and you just use the CRM SVC util to generate all of the entities, you would end up with a fairly big DLL.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if you start there, then you might get scared off from the early bound generated and get that 5 or 8 megabyte DLL before you even wrote a single line of code yourself.
Yeah, but I think that the main reason for going late bound is that I mean, even from the beginning, I've been doing very much generic code. So we create vertical functions that should where you can sort of use the configuration data to work with the customer data, and you configure them to specify which fields to use. I mean, it could be a simple, the classic case, a simple auto numbering feature. So you have a plugin doing the numbering, but you have configuration data telling me how to format it and in which field to put the numbered value. And then you have to go late bound, of course, because you don't know beforehand what model looks like. I think
that is true.
That's basically where I come from, doing a lot of generic development.
Daryl?
The megabytes story is kind of funny because when I originally started generating stuff like in 2011, it wasn't that big because there weren't that many entities. But as they continued to add more and more and more, that number got bigger and bigger and bigger till it went over. One of the plugins I was writing went over the allowed plugin size to deploy to CDS.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, oh, well, this isn't good. So that's why I ended up adding whitelists and blacklists, the early bound generator, to be able to not generate all those entities. So yes, that is a point that goes in my point column of yes, it does generate a larger footprint than late bound. So yes, that is that. But I'll go on to my third and final point of early bound is you can actually add logic to your entities and not have just be plain POCO objects, but to actually have it do something in a way that makes a whole lot more readability sense, I guess, rather than having to have all these other services that you're calling that then takes the data and manipulate them. It's just nice to have a contact that make phone call or something. I don't know, whatever method you want to call on the actual object itself, and not have to be ferrying around these objects and then migrating into something else. And yeah, it's just seems so much more readable to me to be able to add those methods straight to the actual classes.
So what's your favorite method to add there?
What's my favorite one? I don't even know. Sometimes something that's kind of fun to add is like a debugger attributes. So if you wanted to see if you're debugging and you wanted to see a couple of properties rather than having it show just the SDK entity string, you can actually have it show a few properties if you want to, or whatever you wanted to put in your debug properties for it. So that's kind of something neat to do with an actual class. So you
override the toString method there?
Yes and no. So you can override the toString method, but I'm talking about actually like the debugger attributes that you can put on a class within C#. And so that would show up in your debugger if you looked at if you expand like a list of entities. It isn't calling toString. It's using, well, it is under the covers, I guess. But maybe you don't want to actually override the toString. You just want to actually have it show up in the debugger. You can add that to your debugger attribute. Was it browsable debugger display attribute? Remember what it is? You can put that in your class and be able to have that show up. But I know Jonas never makes any mistakes, so he probably doesn't need that. He doesn't need to debug.
Well, I do mistakes, but I haven't learned how to debug plugins properly. Or when I try, it's like, this is just so tedious. So that's why I'm focusing on the plugin trace log. You get everything there.
So that makes a lot more sense to me about why so much effort was placed in that. If you can't actually attach a debugger to your plugins via unit test, Jonas, man, there's so much that I want to give you that apparently it just isn't going to make it over the Swedish border, I guess.
Yeah. I know. My style of development when it comes to plugins is still. I feel like I'm in the 17th century or something, but it works.
Then I'm probably in your base, Jonas, because I don't feel like I'm that sophisticated, like Daryl or some of the other ones that sort of, okay, you put these properties on the class and then we will figure out what steps to register in your environment. And I'm like, well, I have a plugin registration tool. Can't I just use that?
Yeah. That's a whole other story.
That's funny because that's the exact opposite of what Jonas was telling me. He's like, hey, I did a session last year at the CrmUG Summit in North America. I was just creating a plugin from scratch with unit testing, and I needed to deploy it. I used the plugin registration. Jonas was getting on me the tool that he had at least some hand in developing in Toolbox. I think was the previous employer. He used that one to auto deploy it.
Yeah, that one I use all the time.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
that's funny how that.
since I have to look at the plugin trace to actually see what's happening, I need it to when I recompile, it needs to be updated in the target environment, so I will get the new trace log. Like I said, maybe not the most beautiful style, but it works.
I'm starting to see why you and I differ so much in some of the things that we know we should do, but we haven't done. Is because we just haven't gotten to the pain point of doing it. Because your life is, I'm going to change, I'm going to push, I'm going to retrigger, I'm going to look at the trace logs, I'm going to change, I'm going to push, I'm going to retrigger and lift the trace logs. Where my life is, all right, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'll just run a unit test. Oh, let's do whatever I want to do. Unit test, and keep going back there. And then I push at the very end, and generally it works. So yeah, that's interesting how those pain points cause us to find fixes for some of our other pain points.
How do you build up the data to trigger that plugin? So, okay, you have some kind of simulated call from CRM. Okay, this is the fields that are updated with these values. Or how do you do that?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For you who actually do the proper way of unit testing.
Unit testing, I create a unit test for the plugin, and I say, all right, here's my plugin, here's the target, and I manually populate some values in the target, whatever the plugin actually needs, and I give it to the plugin context and have it call the execute method on the plugin, and I'm good to go. There isn't a whole lot. There isn't a whole lot to it till you start getting to a lot of issues where you need to be doing a lot of queries and having lots of things that exist that are custom to that particular instance. So maybe I need a contact that has an account that's in the state of New Jersey or something. So now I've got to create the account for there's two ways to test it. You can fake everything, or you can go through and actually in memory add the account with state of New Jersey and associate it to the contact and then run your test. So I tend to do it that way. That way I make sure all my queries actually get ran. But I can do that in a matter of 3 lines of code. So it's not that big of a deal for the most part.
So you have like a mini CRM database all in that sort of fake CRM organization.
Yeah. So that's exactly what all the unit test frameworks out there that I've seen do. The framework from Delegate, the framework from Jordy's from XRM, Fake XRM, Easy, and then my XRM unit test. That's at the core what all those frameworks are. This fake in-memory I organization service that can interpret query expressions, can interpret XML, and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, that's where that power sits at.
All right. So are we done? Should we continue this, or?
Well, that was the good. We got to get to the bad, right? I mean, I gotta lit into why Jonas needs to come over to my side of the fence, right?
All right. Then. So what's because I think we've been to the ugly, right?
We've been this. Well, the ugly, I would say. Well, here's my thing with Jonas. Why in the world, Jonas? Why in the world do you spend the time to generate your late bound constants when it's practically the same amount of time to generate them all the way and get all the early binding? Like I never understood why you just don't, like, you got to click a button to generate the late bound, you got to click a button to generate the early bound. How is one so much worse than the other?
I don't think it's so much worse. I'm just not. It's not been my style. It's not my style, and for some reason,
that's the old man cranky answer.
Yes, it is. Yes, you know how old I am, and but for some reason, people are actually using my tool as well. So maybe don't look at me. Look at them. I'm just doing it for their sake.
Well, and the funny part is my tool generates all the constants as well, because there are lots of times when you still need to do some late bound stuff as well. So it's like you get both with mine, but no one seems to care. Yeah. They all want. They all are infatuated with the Swedish blue and yellow icons that you have.
So did you add the generate the constants, or is that part of the CRM service util as well?
I added those.
Okay.
So I have a fields class that sits inside the actual entity class. So account.fields. full name or whatever.
There's another tool that does that already.
That
You
adds
mean like the
constants.
late
Yeah,
constants?
actually, you can buy my code.
Okay. All right. Here's another one. We'll get moving on here. So,
Oh.
is late-bound constant generator only a tool that runs within the context of XrmToolBox?
No, it's not actually, because I had a pull request a while ago. Someone wanted to include it in a build pipeline, so to auto-generate it. So there is a command line version of it as well that reads the configuration file you specify for your project and does it that way. Though I don't really understand why I would do that, since when the tool currently doesn't support any just like wildcard, bring me all attributes from this entity. So I mean, if you generate it once in your manually and then regenerate it in a pipeline or automation of some kind, it would generate a file that looks identically the same. So I'm not sure why I would do that until there's the feature of sort of wildcarding or specifying all custom attributes or something like that. So, but short answer, no, it can be automated as well.
All right, I didn't know that one. And then those settings are just a config file that gets checked in, but you can't share the settings within the toolbox, though, right?
How do you mean? Sure.
Does your settings within the toolbox, does it save those to settings directory, the
You
toolbox, or
no,
no?
you save it wherever you want. So you can
So you can
click
manually
save on
save
your
the
project.
settings.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
project.
usually I just save it to my project folder somewhere. So
I'm talking about the settings, not the output.
yep, the settings.
All right, cool. And then you can
So
load the
that
settings.
anyone on my team can work with regenerate.
Yeah, because
right.
you check it in together with your code. Because I don't actually see why you want it in this build step either. None of these. Because for me, it's helping me with the development of this. So I need it while I I just made that attribute. Now I generate the code or the class so I can use it, and then I keep going. So then when I check all the in, it's ready for sort of deployment.
Yeah.
So the one thing that forces you to do is it forces everyone to make, if you're doing it as part of the build pipeline, then it makes sure that no one accidentally steps on each other, because no one ever gets latest every single time. Sometimes people forget. And so if you've added another custom entity or something that you want to generate, that's a reason I've seen people go through and do that. The other thing is you could probably set it up, correct me if I'm wrong, but someone publishes a solution, you could probably kick off a build task to rebuild your generation entities, and then have that get pushed to like via NuGet package or something, or injected into source control.
Right,
so you can do that even.
So when you publish something, a new field or something like that, then you update those entities that are included in the generator.
Yeah, you could wire up some sort of thing like that, but I've never deemed it worth my time to wire that up, because I just run it whenever I need it.
Yeah, I agree there.
All right. So Jonas? What's the worst thing about late bound generator?
Well, one thing, if we're talking about the tool in itself, is as I mentioned, you have to specifically identify this entity, these attributes, these relationships, and so on, and to say what do I want included. It would be a lot better to just say, okay, look at the solution, bring me everything. You can sort of do that because you can select the entities based on the solution, but it's not dynamic. So it's not like next time you open the tool with the same configuration and you added an entity, that will be included as well. So you have to pinpoint each and every entity and attribute and so on. And I mean, that's a usability feature in the tool itself that's missing. If we're looking beyond the tool and looking at late bound, well, of course, some of the things Daryl has mentioned are ones that I sort of agree more with. Like actually, I never, if you know what you're doing, and I'm not saying you have to know exactly the system, but if you know what you're doing, the type, sort of conflicting types, or you expect it to be an int and it's a decimal or something like that, I don't see that as a big problem. It's rarely a problem. Okay, it might be easier to just get it as a typed attribute instead of doing a get value or something like that. But yeah, that's probably it. And then of course, I mean, in the tool, there's always things to improve. I actually improved a lot of the UI and usability of it as I created this UML diagram generator, since it's it's basically the same thing. Read metadata, let me select an entities and relationships and so on, and generate some sort of text file. So I used, it's the same code as Late-bound constant generator. It's not just copied, they share the same code, like 99% of it. And there's a lot done, but there's definitely more that could be done to make it easier. I mean, if Daryl sort of wins this argument, maybe I should just scrap it instead.
You know, I just thought maybe, why don't I just make a late bound version of the early bound generator? I could do that too.
Yeah.
I could just have it, because I'm already doing everything that tool is as far as generating the field names. I can just go ahead and not generate all the attributes and call it a day.
All right then. But for me, it's important to get the types from my personal point of view, because if you sort of have some projects going at the same time and then you swap environments and then you're like, oh, what was that there again? What was that thing? So it's sort of nice to have that already set up for you, from my point of view at least. So yeah. All right then. Where do I go if I want to know more? Daryl, you're first.
So before we go into that one, I do have one concession that I think that needs to be made, at least for both the early and the late, and that's
Alright, so confession time.
Having that you have to make a decision how you're going to share code within a project. It may be a NuGet file. If you do that, then it's either going to be a source only NuGet file that would require you not to have to do IL merging, or you have to do IL merging if you're going to do plugin development, or it could be a shared project file and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's something that you do have to kind of decide to do when you use either the early bound or the late bound constant generator. Although the late bound, you could probably more do that every single time. You could duplicate every single plugin and not feel quite as bad about it. Just it's such a small footprint.
You're talking about if we have several C# projects that would be using sort of the same generated file, and then you can either create it as a shared project or Yeah.
So that's something that you have to actually spend some time thinking about and doing. So if you're used to either of the generators. But anyway, okay. So where do we go if you want to know more? So for me, in early bound, you can obviously download the tool in the XrmToolBox. You can look at the GitHub project for it. There is not a specific GitHub project for any of my XRM Toolbox tools. They're all just my d2b.xrm.xrmToolbox tools project, because that's the way I roll, I guess. And so that's a place to go look there. But if you want an example of how to get it set up and how to get it working, that's where the Visual Studio Solution Accelerator tool for the XrmToolBox will automatically set that up for you. So it will set up the shared projects and an example plugin and example unit testing and all that kind of fun stuff, and walk you through a little wizard experience and set up the configuration needed to generate the early bound entities, and then you'd open up the early bound entity generator and actually create them. So that's my take you by the hand and walk you through, and now you've got something running on a local machine.
And you have something step-by-step guide or something to that to show users how to do it the first time.
Yeah, it's a whole wizard experience of, hey, do you want to add, is this the first time you're running it for the solution? Yes. Okay, here, let's go and add all these other projects to include into your whole solution. Or it's, oh, you've already ran this a few times. All right, here, let me just create a new plugin for you. You want a new plugin? You want a workflow? What do you want to create? So it will do that for you as well. But if you're brand new and you just want to create something and have some unit testing, go through and do that. And it's a real simple way to go through and do that. Play around.
From what I understand, you can use the Visual Studio Solution Accelerator without generating early bound classes as well, right?
Yep.
So it's for me as well.
It's for you as well. Yes. It would set up the project so that you could at least use my XRM framework as well. Yep. So that's where you go.
Jonas, where do I go if I want to know more about the early bound?
The early bound, you go talk to Daryl. The late bound constant generator. Well, just like Daryl, it's a tool in the toolbox. There's actually, I don't think I've written anything about it on my blog. I've written about most of the other tools, but go there or reach out to me. I'm always almost listening to Twitter or wherever you may find me, and I'll gladly give you a short run through of the. That's it.
So Daryl, do you have any public speaking or anything else where we can see you next?
I don't know if we will ever have public speaking again.
No, if you're listening to this later than when it's hitting live, we're sort of in this corona quarantine, so everyone is at home and all the conferences are cancelled here now, so yeah, that's why.
Yep. So I'm thinking about doing some more online like Teams meetings or live share stuff. I just did one last night with Scott Colson, who was showing off his framework that he uses for his plugins. So we kind of walked through that together, and I posted that to my YouTube channel. So I guess you could follow me on YouTube, and I might have some stuff coming out there far sooner than actually in person. But yeah, Twitter's great, and LinkedIn as well. And if you do LinkedIn, just mention where you first heard of me, or hey, I use this tool, or hey, I heard of you on the not the .NET Rocks, it's the what's the name of the podcast?
CRM Rocks.
CRM Rocks. There we go. All right, I didn't know if you changed it yet, or if you're going to change it or not. So
Power Rocks.
Apparently your marketing department isn't very big as far as forcing you to change it.
No, it's not. Power Rocks isn't the same. Well, perhaps I will have to go with that now. Though.
It sounds like some sort of fun item in like a role-playing game or something. Picked up the Power Rocks.
Yeah.
Smited.
All right, Jonas, do you have any public speak or anything like that scheduled?
Well, yeah, actually, I do have one scheduled, or 3 at the same time, because I was going to speak in the Community Summit in Barcelona now in March a couple of weeks ago, but that was postponed. So now it's slated for end of June, beginning of July, and I haven't heard that being cancelled yet. So technically, yes, I will be in Barcelona this summer to speak there. But
so we were supposed to meet there.
So, yeah, not there, not anywhere actually. So we'll see what happens. And I've done a few webinars before, but I'm really struggling when you have this one-way communication. So I'm hoping I can do some more sort of webinars where I can interact with the audience. I actually did one in February for the Seattle user group. So I was there. I was there, but from my home office, talking about XrmToolBox tools with their user group, and they had camera in the back of the room in the ceiling, so I can see everyone, and they had their microphones on, so I could actually communicate. And I think. I'd like to do more of that now in these strange days when we can't meet face to face. So we'll see what happens. Nothing planned as of now, but definitely something will come up.
All right then. So who do you want to battle next on this podcast then?
Who I would like to battle here? I don't think I like this whole battling thing, and I think this goes alongside with, if you've heard about this. The new thing, the hashtag ProCodeNoCode Unite, that was started by Scott Duro and Sara Lagerquist in Scottish Summit. I think that's the last live event that ever took place in the Power Platform. Which was, they started like this, okay, let's battle, let's talk about pro code and no code and see who wins. And I mean, the conclusion is that there's a time and a place for everything. So I think that's the same regarding late bound, early bound. I think that's the same for all
unmanaged solutions.
No, that's not an argument. There's no battle there.
All right, so
Sorry.
There we have it.
And I've done that. And I've met this guy from the US, and he actually, that's his name, GUS. So one's too many. I mean, it's not a discussion. Let's just drop that. But I really think that there's a place for everything, and the technologies and the approaches that we are discussing here today, not just on this podcast, but the things that are up for discussion are all about really valid technologies, really valid approaches. Otherwise, there would literally be no discussion, because the other side would be dead. No one would argue for that. So those discussions that are still around are good discussions to have. It's not a battle. It's discussions, and it's
no, of course not.
Learning when to use what.
It's just a fun frame to have the discussion on.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. How about you, Daryl? Who would you like to battle?
So I don't know if I've I would like to battle against, but I would be interested in those that are seeing the usage of .NET Core versus just the regular .NET framework when it comes to development for the CDS platform.
Mm-hmm.
Do we even have the SDKs for Core?
They've just started rolling some of that out, I believe.
Oh, all right then.
Yeah,
Or
it's
perhaps,
an early alpha version and open the GitHub repository for feedback and so on. I really encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, that's a good step in that direction then. So perhaps JavaScript versus TypeScript for you then, Daryl.
Well, every JavaScript file is a TypeScript file, so there's no.
Isn't it the other way around?
I would think that it's almost even more so of. I saw someone tweet on some tool that there was C# to JavaScript like tool or something, and I was like, no, that's just bad. Don't do that, people. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't try to write JavaScript with C#. It just, you're gonna want to shoot somebody, or you're gonna create really, really bad JavaScript that won't work the way you want it to work, and you can't debug it. So
Is it like the code you're working on right now?
No, the code I'm working on now is a whole slew of other mistakes that have been made. But yeah, after making the jump from C# to getting into JavaScript, getting into TypeScript, and getting a much better familiarity of why they're so different, and having to handle those differences, TypeScript is the one language that I've been like in C# and be like, I wish this was TypeScript. Every other one, I'm like, oh, I'm happy with C#, but yeah, that's the one language. I'm like, I wish I could do this in C# like I can in TypeScript.
All right. Do you have any links to self-promotion, Jonas?
Self-promotion?
Yeah. Your home, your blog, your...
Yeah, not my home, that's for me, but my webpage is, well, jonasr.app. I think that's sort of concise and short enough.
How about you, Daryl?
So I've owned my own company for a year now, over a year, and I still haven't done anything with my domain. So my webpage at gapintegrity.com is just like a ad for the domain host. So so I have to kind of cry a little bit in that. But Twitter is probably the best way to keep track of what's going on with and reach out to me. My handle's ddlabar.
Yeah, and everyone who's listening, you can comment on XrmRocks.com and you can decide the winner there. And see you next time.
This has been the XrmToolCast with Jonas Rapp and Daryl Labar. If you have any questions for Jonas or I, or suggestions for future episodes, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com or tweet to XrmToolCast.